Have you ever noticed how certain emotions cling to you, no matter how hard you try to shake them off? Maybe it's a sense of guilt with no clear origin, a persistent fear of inadequacy, or a deep-seated resentment toward authority figures. It's easy to assume these feelings are reactions to your present circumstances, your job, your relationships, or daily stress. But here's a difficult truth. What's holding you back didn't begin in the now. Its roots were sown long ago, shaped by early experiences, especially by your connection, or lack thereof, with your father or a father figure. Sigmund Freud, the Austrian neurologist and the pioneer of psychoanalysis, dedicated his life to exploring how unconscious forces shape human behavior. He cautioned us that the image of the father holds extraordinary weight in the psyche. The way you perceived and emotionally responded to your father's presence or absence continues to influence your life in ways you might not even realize. You may believe you've moved on, that the past is behind you, but your body, your habits, and your emotional responses often tell a different story. Ask yourself, how often have you pushed yourself to meet others' expectations at your own expense? How many times have you doubted your own value, feeling like a fraud despite your efforts? Have you caught yourself sabotaging opportunities before they even begin, driven by an inner critic whispering, "You're not good enough?" And how? Many moments have you found yourself bending to the will of bosses, partners, or authority figures, as if still trying to win the approval you never received as a child? It doesn't matter if your father was physically present or absent, nurturing or harsh, distant or overly involved, the impact lingers. An absent father can leave behind an emotional void that you spend your life trying to fill. An authoritarian father can give rise to a relentless internal judge. A passive or submissive father might set you on a lifelong quest for security or leave you distrusting anyone who attempts to guide or support you. The truth is, there is no neutral father figure. His influence always leaves a trace, and until you acknowledge that imprint, it will continue to shape your choices and experiences. Freud believed this influence extended beyond the individual eat-mold societies. In works like Totem and Taboo and Civilization and Its Discontents, he argued that the fear, guilt, and repression inherited from a symbolic father figure underlie many of our social structures and cultural norms. But before you can begin to change the world around you, you must face what's within. You must explore the relationship you developed or were forced to develop with your father. And this isn't about surface-level reflection. It's about diving deep into your unconscious mind and confronting what has long been buried. Yes, it's a painful process, but it's also the only path to genuine liberation. Many people assume their emotional struggles began in adulthood with a failed relationship, a dissatisfying job, or a major setback. But psychoanalysis tells a different story. The most profound psychological conflicts often form well before we even understand the world around us. And one of the most powerful of these inner struggles is something you may have heard of but never fully grasped: the Oedipus complex. Freud explored this concept in detail in his 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, and it remains one of the most challenging ideas in psychological history. Between the ages of 3 and 6, every child navigates a crucial emotional phase 1 that profoundly shapes their development. During this time, children begin to form powerful attachments to their parents. what seems like a simple and natural bond, however, often masks a far more complex and unconscious emotional conflict. Like every child, you once yearned to be the sole focus of your mother's affection, to be her entire world. Your earliest quest for exclusive attention met an invisible opponent, your father. To the infant mind, he seemed to claim all of your mother's love, and though you may not recall it, that unspoken rivalry sparked jealousy, desire, and, above all, guilt. A child's mind cannot grasp such turmoil, so those emotions were pushed underground but never vanished. In boys, Freud labeled this dynamic the Oedipus complex. In girls, he outlined a counterpart later, refined by Carl Jung, known as the Electra complex. For daughters, the unconscious longing shifts toward the father while the mother becomes the rival. In either case, guilt, fear, and repression settle in as lasting shapers of the personality. Those conflicts were not erased, they were buried. Yet the emotional charge, fear, shame, self-doubt remained, silently molding your psyche. They taught you without words that desire is perilous, that challenging authority invites punishment, that love carries guilt. These lessons coalesced into the superego, the inner monitor that judges and disciplines your thoughts and actions. Reflect. For a moment, how often have you censored yourself without knowing why? How many times have you wrestled with guilt over wanting something good for yourself? How frequently have you held your tongue before someone more powerful, even when you were certain you were right? These are distant echoes of the original conflict. Perhaps you struggle to maintain healthy relationships because you feel intrinsically unworthy of love. Or maybe you become possessive and controlling, determined never to be replaced, mirroring the fear you once felt as a child. You might even downplay your abilities at work, subconsciously avoiding competition with male authority figures. All of this is the Oedipus or Electra drama playing out in adulthood. And because conscious memory rarely reaches that far back, you grow up believing these reactions are simply who you are. They are not. They are fragments of an unresolved, unconscious battle. Until you illuminate them, you will keep fighting wars you don't realize you're fighting. Yet the Oedipus and Electra stages are only the opening act. Once those turbulent feelings are repressed, the father figure ceases to be merely external. He takes up residence inside you. Unable to manage the clash of desire, rivalry, and fear, the unconscious absorbs the paternal image, giving birth to the paternal complex. In The Ego and the ID, Freud explains that this internalized father becomes the backbone of the superego, an unrelenting inner judge. Whether your real-life father was present or distant hardly matters. When absence leaves a void, the mind constructs an idealized figure to occupy it. The psyche does not tolerate empty spaces. Thus, even the least involved father can end up wielding the strongest influence, an influence that continues to watch, evaluate, and when you stray from its standards, punish you from within. When a child grows up with a violent father, the mind often defends itself by forming a harsh internal judge, a superego that constantly expects punishment. On the other hand, if the father is weak or passive, the child may internalize the belief that the world offers no real safety. In every case, the child doesn't relate to the father as he truly is. Instead, she constructs a mental version of I'm an inner father figure, and it's with this imagined version that the inner dialogue continues, even into adulthood. These early dynamics quietly shape your everyday behavior. You may enter a relationship and find yourself constantly trying to please your partner, terrified of rejection or abandonment. You feel unable to say no, as if still trying to gain your father's approval. Or perhaps the opposite occurs. You reject all forms of authority, constantly challenging leaders, bosses, or partners, driven by a subconscious urge to win a battle you once lost as a child. Maybe you live with a relentless inner critic, a voice that tells you you're never enough. No matter how much you accomplish, you still feel like a fraud. This voice is the internalized father, the psychological superego that continues to reprimand you because somewhere along the way, you learn to associate love and acceptance with constant self-sacrifice. In more profound cases, the paternal complex doesn't just affect your emotions, it steers your entire life path. You might avoid leadership roles because you fear becoming like the rejecting father figure you remember. Or you might chase achievements obsessively, trying to prove your worth to an invisible father who lives on in your mind. According to Freud, the child's mind cannot simply resolve such deep emotional turmoil, it buries it. But what is repressed doesn't vanish, it resurfaces through repetitive patterns. This brings us to one of the most painful truths of the unconscious: compulsive repetition. You're not just carrying emotional baggage, you're reliving it. Again and again, you attract the same types of people, find yourself in similar conflicts, and experience the same internal struggles. And until you become aware of this cycle, you'll remain caught in it. In the next section, we'll explore how this repetition works and why real change feels so hard. You'll begin to see why, despite your best efforts, you may keep ending up in the same types of relationships, the same workplace tensions, and the same unshakable feelings of inadequacy. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing to the channel to support this content. Now that you understand there's an internal father figure, an unconscious blueprint shaping your thoughts and behavior, you must know awareness is only the beginning. There's a deeper mechanism at play that keeps these patterns alive. It's an unconscious cycle, always repeating the same emotional drama, just with different people. Freud identified this as compulsive repetition, a cornerstone of his theory in remembering, repeating, and working through. The unconscious isn't just hiding pain, it's trying to work through it. It recreates past wounds in an attempt to resolve them, even if you're unaware of what those wounds are. So what happens? You find yourself drawn to people and situations that mirror the emotional patterns of your childhood. You enter a romantic relationship only to discover you've subconsciously chosen someone emotionally unavailable, much like the distant father figure you once longed for. Deep down, you're hoping that this time you'll get the love you missed. But because the unconscious choice reflects the same unresolved issue, the result is often the same: hurt and disappointment. Or maybe you're repeatedly attracted to dominant, controlling partners. Unconsciously, you're reliving the dynamic, with a strict or overbearing father trying either to overcome the submission you once felt or finally win the approval you never received. But the inner child, still wounded, responds with the same reactions: fear, guilt, and self-sabotage. In your career, you might shy away from opportunities to shine, convinced you don't deserve recognition. That's the inner critic at work, shaped by a judgmental father figure. Or conversely, you could become a perfectionist, relentlessly chasing success to earn the approval of that inner father. That inner critic, never satisfied, no matter what you do, doesn't disappear, even when you rebel. If you constantly find yourself pushing back against authority, struggling to trust leadership, or undermining relationships whenever someone holds power over you, you're not just reacting to the present. You're still caught in an unconscious battle with the father figure of your past. And unless this hidden root is acknowledged, the same emotional drama will replay, just with different faces and settings. What's most ironic is that the more you run from certain feelings or situations, the more you seem to attract them. As Freud explained, what is repressed doesn't simply vanish, it resurfaces. It shows up disguised in your habits, in your emotional responses, in the choices you repeat without realizing. You can switch cities, end relationships, leave jobs, even cut off family, but unless you look inward, the story will continue. The same narrative, the same emotions, just dressed in new clothes. So, are you doomed to live on repeat? The answer is no, but the path to freedom is not simplistic. This isn't about forcing a positive mindset or telling yourself to just change. It demands deep, inner work, recognizing hidden patterns, bringing the unconscious into light, and slowly untangling the old loops. To truly break free, we must explore how the image of the father has been mythologized, not just within us, but as a foundation of social structure itself. Because to break your internal chains, you must also question the societal beliefs that strengthen them. If you've followed along this far, you already see the father figure doesn't only exist in your personal memories. It's embedded in the very framework of society. These patterns you struggle with are not just personal, they're collective. Freud was among the first to highlight this in works like Totem and Taboo and Civilization and Its Discontents. He described the concept of the primordial father, a symbolic figure who held absolute power in early human tribes. He wasn't just a parent, he controlled access to women, imposed authority, and represented total dominance. The myth of his murder, followed by overwhelming guilt from his descendants, explains how moral and religious codes emerged. The birth of law, taboo, and civilization itself was rooted in a shared sense of guilt toward this original father figure. But this isn't ancient history. It's a cycle that continues with every generation. Culture has deified the father archetype. It lives on in institutions, in religion as God the Father, in governments as the ultimate ruler, and corporations as the all-powerful CEO. Everywhere, society recreates paternal authority, demanding obedience, enforcing rules, and warning of punishment for stepping out of line. This is why you feel guilt when you question norms, why you hesitate to stand out, challenge the status quo, or follow your inner truth. It's not just your own superego whispering judgment. It's a collective one, built over centuries through tradition and symbolism. From childhood, you've been shaped to obey. School conditions you to seek validation from authority figures. Religion reinforces the idea of a watchful father who sees your thoughts and punishes disobedience. Legal systems mirror this structure with hierarchical control and penalties. Even in personal relationships, the same conditioning echoes: a fear of letting down a superior, anxiety in the presence of charismatic authority, a compulsive need for emotional validation. All of this reflects how culture reinforces the internalized structures born from the paternal complex. Real freedom requires more than inner healing. It demands a challenge to these inherited cultural scripts. True liberation means asking, who taught me that obedience is a virtue above all else, and why? But before we can challenge the outside, we must begin within, examining and dismantling the core beliefs we've absorbed over time. You may now ask, how do I break free from this cycle? Awareness is the beginning, but not the end. True healing goes beyond understanding. It requires action, structure, and consistent inner practice. In the next section, we'll dive into specific tools and strategies to help you confront and shift this invisible legacy for good. If this message resonates with you, check out the resources linked in the pinned comment. My ebook, Beyond the Shadow, explains Carl Jung's core ideas in clear terms, while Dialogues with the Unconscious offers a 30-day journey to integrate them into your life. Now that you've glimpsed the depth of the paternal complex and how it shapes both your inner world and the culture around you, the transformation begins. A natural question arises: is it really possible to break free from such deeply embedded patterns? The answer is yes, but it's not a simple path. This kind of change requires much more than reading a book or repeating affirmations in the mirror. It calls for facing your unconscious mind directly, a process that demands effort, courage, and consistency. The first step is awareness. What remains hidden within you has the most control. But once you shed light on it, it begins to lose its grip. So just by being here reflecting on these ideas, you're already starting a process of transformation. But awareness alone is just the beginning. Your mind has built up defenses over time, and even once you spot a recurring pattern, the tendency to repeat it can still linger. Why? Because for years, maybe your whole life, you've mistaken these patterns for your true identity. That's why the second step is continual observation. You must become an investigator of your own emotional world. Begin to track your emotional triggers. When do you feel overwhelming guilt? When do you silence yourself or give in too easily? When does anger rise up disproportionately toward people in authority? When are you desperately seeking approval? Don't try to analyze everything, just observe, write it down. Make the invisible visible. Here's a practical example. Suppose you've noticed that your romantic relationships often involve criticism or emotional invalidation. Instead of just enduring it, pause and ask, whose voice does this echo? Is it an inner echo of a father or father figure who once made you feel inadequate? When you identify the source of these emotional patterns, their power begins to fade. However, there's a limit to what you can uncover alone. The unconscious, by definition, hides itself from view. That's where the third and perhaps most powerful step comes in: therapy. Not all therapy is the same. Surface-level conversations may not be enough. What you need is a deep, structured approach like psychoanalysis or psychodynamic therapy that is equipped to explore the unconscious mind. This work isn't about venting problems. It's about slowly unpacking buried conflicts, unmasking the inner critic, and reshaping the internal image of the Father that has guided so many of your choices. Through therapy, you can begin to recognize that the critical voice holding you back is not truly yours, that the fear of taking action isn't your authentic fear, it's inherited, that your tendency to repeat painful relationship patterns is not fate, it's a narrative you can rewrite. If you choose to seek therapy, find someone who truly understands these deeper psychological dynamics. Look for professionals trained in working with the unconscious, as this makes all the difference. And while therapy is foundational, there are supportive practices that can enhance the process. Reflective journaling can help you bring suppressed emotions to the surface. Mindful meditation can sharpen your ability to observe without judgment. But remember, none of these replace the depth of true inner work guided by a skilled therapist. At this stage of the journey, you may now realize that what keeps repeating in your life, your anxieties, your sabotaging behaviors, your guilt, is not simply who you are. These are not flaws or personality quirks. They are echoes of unresolved childhood experiences. Your mind, in its early formation, constructed these patterns as survival strategies, and often these patterns are shaped by your relationship with your father or the symbolic role he played in your development. If this remains unexamined,